Alright, so here we have a compost tumbler. You can make them a lot of different ways. Here we use a 55-gallon drum. This was our only expense. All these other materials were recycled. For the frame, we used metal carport pieces that had broken, and we just welded them together. The design doesn't matter as much, but what we used for the design, why we built it so high, was so that we could get a wheelbarrow underneath of it. Another thing to take into consideration is how wide you make the door. We made the door wide enough to get a shovel inside of it, but not too wide because it does kind of compromise the frame. You can make it however you want as long as you have the three main components, which are air, heat, and rotation. For air, we just drilled holes. We made them smaller, but put a lot of them in there. That way the material wouldn't slip through, but you could still get hopefully a decent amount of air in there. Also, for the heat, because it is a contained area, it helps the heat build up more than if you just have it in an open spot. Another thing most people would do is paint it black. If it's black, it'll absorb more heat. We're in a very sunny and hot climate, so it's not as much of a concern. For the rotation, ours, we put it on a metal pole. Some people connect the pole to the barrel so you can rotate it. This one, the barrel rotates around the bar, and we added handles onto ours just so there'd be a little bit more leverage as we rotate it. And it doesn't have to be plastic, it can be metal. These are pretty common and fairly cheap, so that's why we use this plastic drum. We also added a brace onto the edge so that as it rotates around the pole, it'll last longer because it has this support. It's important to measure the length of your barrel so that you can know how wide to make your frame. We made it a little bit longer on each side. This can kind of slide back and forth, which is fine. You can make it a little closer if you wanted to, but this kind of gives us more area to play with. And we also put a brace right here to pinch in between these to hold them intact. This is a thicker piece of metal. And then we added these two to kind of hold in the bar. We drilled a hole in both of these pieces, and since there's already a hole in this piece, we're able to take a screw and put it through here. We only needed to put it on one side. The other side doesn't have a screw, and this keeps the pipe from rotating so that this rotates more easily. Alright, so for a frame, like I said, we used metal pieces from a carport. It was a little difficult because there was paint and it's a thin material, but we just cut it at the height that we wanted so that it'd be high enough for the wheelbarrow. And then we took the piece, cut it at an angle, and then used the piece that we cut out as an angle to put there and use to weld so that there's more material since it is so thin. We put braces here and here, and then we used wooden material to put a brace on the sides. This actually worked out really well because now it's very light and it's not very bulky, so you can put it in different areas. Originally we thought of maybe doing a triangular design, and then went to this design because if you're on an unlevel surface, it can be kind of difficult if you have more area touching the ground. So we just put 4 points of contact and built up from there. For our barrel, we installed a handle and 2 locks on each side, as well as 2 hinges. I also installed this piece right here. That way, when you unlock it, you can use this bungee to hold the lid up. So inside, we just use a metal ridge cap, which is the metal piece that goes on top of a roof, and we bent them and cut them so that they would fit inside here. And we placed them in 3 different areas, one on this side, one in the middle, and one on the other side. That way they're spaced out and can rotate throughout the whole barrel. The purpose of these fins is to help move the material. You can put the material in there without the fins, but it won't rotate and actually turn the material as well as if you have those on there. Alright, so there are many benefits to a compost tumbler. One is that it's easier to rotate. A lot of traditional methods where you just kind of put it on the ground, it's a lot of work to shovel and rotate the material. This way you can just come out here and give it a turn. Another benefit is because it is enclosed, it gets hot faster and retains that heat. So it breaks down the materials faster. So for the compost tumbler, the types of materials you want to add in there are carbons and nitrogens, which are organic materials. So for your carbons, that's going to be your dry material or brown material, is what people refer to them as, like dried grass, dried straw, wood that it's chopped up. So the second part is your wet materials or green material, which is your nitrogens. This is going to be your kitchen waste like coffee grounds, fruits, vegetables, manure, anything like that that kind of will get the process going. It's important to have both parts and the proper ratio. So for this, they recommend 2 parts dry to 1 part wet. So usually you'll add dry grass clippings and then add your wet material. Another ratio could be 3 parts dry to 1 part wet, also known as 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. Kind of play around with it, see what works best for you. We're on a farm here, so we have manure, so that's going to be part of our accelerator. It's recommended to add manure, already composted soil, or just soil from the dirt to kind of get the process going and accelerate that process. So once you've got all your materials added, you're going to want to rotate it 2 to 4 times a week. I wouldn't recommend every day, because if it's rotated too much, then it doesn't have time to actually sit there and break down. Part of the process is having it sit there, heat up, and that's what kind of causes that breakdown. Also, you want to keep it wet, but not too wet. You want to keep it more just moist. If it's too wet or too dry, then that's not good. Too dry, it won't really break down. Too wet, and it's just a sloppy mess. So when you rotate it, just give it a good hard turn. It's important to mix up all that material. Granted, it won't spin that easily when there's actually material in there, but you get the point. How can we be better stewards of all the resources that God has given us? One of those ways is to use what most people consider waste and turn it into nutrients. Beautiful nourishment for other plants. A lot of soil doesn't have as much nutrients as you can use in composting. We use a lot of our kitchen waste. 40% of food in America is thrown out. That's quite a lot. And if we could use that to turn into nutritious soil, then you have a happier garden and more food. It increases production and increases the nutrition in the food. God has provided us with so many materials in ways that we can live healthier lives. Looking at this, it's hard to imagine that it can turn into this. Most people think that dirt just comes from the ground, but all this material, if properly composted, can turn into beautiful, nutritious dirt. Just like God does, He turns broken things into beauty. God can do anything, and He can restore anything. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps and you're able to make a beautiful compost tumbler.